What's going on, guys? Dare here with Fantasy Football Advice, coming at you with another fantasy football video. Today, we got a good one for you guys. We are going over the top bust at each position. Obviously, with the draft just weeks away, that could dramatically change some of the situations for players that may not have such a bright future for 2021. But for the most part, the players that we do have on this list, regardless of what ends up shaking out in the draft, I do still feel like we will be heading into the 2021 season a bit bearish on these players. Before we do get into exactly who those players are, just want to shout out that we do have a promotion going on now until the end of April. If you use code FFA at checkout, all of our packages are currently 15% off. We are making massive strides to make this draft package better than anyone we put out so far, including video breakdowns and risk ratings on all draftable players. So if you are interested in getting our draft package for the first time, or maybe you are a member who gets it each and every year, make sure to take advantage of it because it's only valid until the end of the month. With that being said though, let's hop over to our stat of the day. Yesterday's stat of the day was among the 7 skill players to average over 20 fantasy points per game last season. Only one of those players was actually drafted outside of the first 2 rounds. Which player was that? And the correct answer was actually Stephon Diggs. Congratulations to Devin B, who was the first to get this right on YouTube, and over on Twitter, Travis Gunnell. So congratulations to both of you guys. As for today's stat of the day, which tight end boasted the league's best catch rate at the position for 2020? Once again, that's which tight end in 2020 boasted the league's best catch rate at that position. Leave your answer in the comments section down below. We'll be happy to let you know who wins in tomorrow's video. With all that out of the way, let's hop over to our players on our bust list. We're going to start with the player on the thumbnail, a player I believe a lot of people are down on this year for obvious reasons. We are of course talking about Josh Jacobs of the Las Vegas Raiders. Looking at Josh Jacobs' 2020 season, it can easily be summarized as successful. While he was a player who was being drafted inside the top 12 at the running back position, he was in a tier in which players were able to draft him in the 2nd and 3rd round. When looking at return on investment at that value point, him finishing as the RB8 last season in both standard and PPR, managing to stay healthy in virtually the entire season, appearing in 15 of 16 total games, which in a year like 2020 where running backs were not only falling down left and right, we also had to deal with COVID, which meant most rosters were struggling to even fill out all of their starter positions. Health and his ability to remain on the field was certainly an asset that he brought that a lot of running backs in that range did not. So for those reasons and many more, Josh Jacobs is likely going to be a player looked at in the upcoming fantasy draft as a running back that's coming in at a value. Currently, he's coming off the board as the RB15, and if he were able to replicate what he did in the 2020 season, getting the RB8 at an RB15 draft price, that of course would be the definition of a value. Unfortunately though, I do believe him being the RB15 is pushing it quite a bit. We actually have him ranked outside of the top 20. And one of the major factors in that ranking comes down to the fact that they added Kenyon Drake off of free agency. Now, Kenyon Drake himself, when compared to Josh Jacobs, they do have quite a different skill set. Kenyon Drake clearly going to fill the role of the pass-catching running back in this offense, an area where Josh Jacobs has not been getting a ton of volume, but also an area where Josh Jacobs has struggled in as well. While he did see an increase in volume in the receiving game from year 1 to year 2, his rookie season having 27 targets, then in the 2020 season, he saw an uptick to 45 targets, converting that into 33 receptions for 238 yards. With that increase in volume, we were able to get a better understanding of how he was able to perform in that area, and to be frank, he was a bit underwhelming. When comparing him to receiving running back Jalen Richard, also in that same offense that same year, he was trailing in major areas like yards per target as well as catch rate. The Las Vegas Raiders did bring Kenyon Drake in to relieve some of that workload of Josh Jacobs, so to expect Josh Jacobs to have the same amount of work on the ground, it's just unlikely. And with Kenyon Drake having a much larger receiving resume, when it comes to clear passing situations, Kenyon Drake is likely going to be the running back you see on the field. We must keep in mind that the Raiders are in a division with the Kansas City Chiefs, who are no stranger to putting up massive point totals, also with Justin Herbert leading the LA Chargers. Whenever it comes to divisional matchups with the Raiders, clear passing situations are going to be something we see frequently. One other thing commonly overlooked due to Josh Jacobs having a successful fantasy season is his drop in efficiency. Throughout the 2020 season, Josh Jacobs was only able to average 3.9 yards per carry, under the 4 yards per carry mark we typically would like to see. And with the Raiders having a poor run blocking line last year, although they have been making clear strides to shore up that position, my concern is if they don't also make an emphasis to target that position in the draft, the hopes for Josh Jacobs to have a massive uptick in efficiency for 2021 is just unlikely. Alright guys, we're moving over to the next position and we're going to be talking about the quarterback position, and the next player we have is Ryan Tannehill of the Tennessee Titans. There was a time not too long ago where if we were to list Ryan Tannehill on a bust list, it would be an obvious choice, but with the way that Ryan Tannehill has been playing since joining the Tennessee Titans, it's actually somewhat of a bold statement. Last year, Ryan Tannehill finished as the quarterback 8, and even looking back at what he was able to do on a per game basis 2 seasons ago when he was on the Titans, we're talking about a player who is averaging top 5 production. While I do still view Ryan Tannehill as a potential target for people who may be waiting on quarterback or who may be taking a risky QB1 with the intention of securing a high upside QB2, Tannehill undoubtedly has the tools to fit that mold. With that being said, I do believe there are additional risk factors for Ryan Tannehill this year that he didn't have last year, where if a few things don't go in his direction, I could see the floor falling right out from under him, ultimately resulting in a disappointing season. Now, the first factor that is going to be amplifying the risk of Ryan Tannehill this season is the loss of some of his major weapons in the receiving game. Corey Davis was an uber reliable wide receiver 2 for this offense. In 2020, he was able to put up 65 receptions, 984 yards to go along with 5 touchdowns. But production aside, Corey Davis did much more for this offense, and more specifically Ryan Tannehill, playing the role of the safety net and a player that could be consistently targeted for those easy yards. Having a player like that who was able to perform consistently opened up many opportunities for big plays that we saw numerous times from AJ Brown. Now, I'm not sitting here and telling you that AJ Brown is going to have less upside. In fact, I believe AJ Brown should have even more upside this year due to likely falling into a much higher target market share. But with those types of plays being a lower success percentage, and with the team losing Corey Davis, a player that helped set up a lot of those big plays, my fear is that Ryan Tannehill may be forced into a situation where they're going to be asking a bit too much from him. We also cannot forget that Jonnu Smith has also exited in free agency, now a Patriot. And with a player like Jonnu Smith, one of the most physically gifted tight ends in the entire league, somebody who has proven to be able to perform in the areas of yards after catch, who also was a player that they heavily relied on in the red zone, posting multiple 2-touchdown performances. Losing these 2 major pieces that contributed in many ways and were very successful in their areas that they were utilized in, it is going to have a massive effect on the quarterback. And unless we have other players who are easily able to step up in either similar ways or their own new way, considering the fact that we just have not seen that yet, that is going to amplify the risk for Tannehill for this upcoming season. God forbid if there is an injury to either Derrick Henry or AJ Brown, that would have massive impacts on the way that the offense is able to operate at all. And if either one of those players did go down, I wouldn't be surprised if this offense does struggle to even move the ball downfield. One last thing before we move on to the next player that I do have as a risk factor for Ryan Tannehill comes down to the amount of rushing touchdowns he had last season. Tannehill did finish the year with 7 rushing touchdowns, a mark that actually matched Lamar Jackson. Now, even though Ryan Tannehill is a pretty mobile quarterback and the majority of his career rushing touchdowns have came on the team of the Tennessee Titans, it's just not a realistic expectation for us to head into 2021 expecting him to match that number. Even if his rushing touchdowns were to drop to a reasonable 3 rushing touchdowns in a season, that would instantly drop his per game averages by a total of 1.5 fantasy points per game. And when we're talking about QBs on the cusp of the QB1 conversation, position, 1.5 fantasy points per game is a massive impact. When you have Derrick Henry on the roster, one of the biggest and scariest running backs looked at in the red zone, you know he's going to be the first and clear option to use. And with the loss of significant red zone weapons like Jonnu Smith, opposing defenses will be able to have an easier time at being able to stop any potential QB rushing touchdowns. Alright guys, we are moving over to the next position, the wide receiver position, and to be frank, it was a bit difficult picking a wide receiver bust candidate. I did not want to select either an unproven player or a player with a very low ADP. I also didn't want to pick a player who is coming off of a down season either, so I did elect to go for Adam Thielen of the Minnesota Vikings. Adam Thielen is coming off of a season in which he finished 10th in PPR, 7th in standard, and whenever you see a player who is ranking higher in standard than he did finish in PPR, that is a clear indicator that that player performed much better in the touchdown department and potentially worse in the volume department. When it comes to Adam Thielen in 2020, that's exactly the case. This was a player who was unable to eclipse 1,000 receiving yards, and excluding 2019 where he did battle injuries, only appearing in 10 games, 1,000 receiving yards was a notch he was able to compile in both 2017 and 2018. In both of those healthy seasons, Adam Thielen did see target totals of 142 and 153. That's elite level volume, and when we compare it to 2020 where he received just a mere 103 targets, we have to wonder if the best production for Adam Thielen may be behind him. With polarizing rookie Justin Jefferson now on the roster, who in his first year as a pro commanded 125 targets, 22 targets more than his veteran counterpart, the odds are we can't expect for Adam Thielen to receive a much higher target market share than what we saw a season ago. Believe it or not, Adam Thielen did finish 32nd in total targets for 2020, and despite him finishing inside the top 10 at the position, if his target market share were to remain the same, I would have major concerns on his ability to still finish inside the top 12, let alone the top 20. For that outcome to remain a possibility, Adam Thielen's touchdown totals would once again have to be high. 2020 receiving 14 touchdowns, compare that to his previous career high of 9 touchdowns, a feat he accomplished on the back of a 153 target season that year. If you ask me, I just believe that the odds are stacked against him, and with Justin Jefferson now entering his second year and likely commanding an even higher target market share, coupled with the exit of Kyle Rudolph, which brings in more opportunities for Irv Smith, a tight end with a much stronger receiving skill set who is going to be relied upon to be a receiving tight end in this offense, even though for the past several years while Kirk Cousins has been the quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings, we have seen a target funnel to the wide receiver position. I do believe the Minnesota Vikings, feeling comfortable with letting go of Kyle Rudolph, paving the way for Irv Smith to see the field and have more opportunities, is a clear indicator that they are going to shuffle things up when it comes to target distribution. And if all of the targets aren't going to the wide receiver position, the likeliness of Adam Thielen receiving the same target market share as he did even a season ago is just not something we can guarantee. Heading into last season, we did have Adam Thielen as a player to target, one of the players we looked at as one of the safest at the position, and heading into this year, although we are getting a draft day discount on him, I do still think you are going to be having to choose him as one of the riskier players, and typically in the early rounds, you know we like to avoid risk as much as possible. Alright guys, we're moving over to the final position, the tight end position, and this one I think is one of the more obvious choices. We have Evan Engram of the New York Giants. Now just a moment ago when we were talking about Minnesota, we did mention that Kyle Rudolph is no longer a Viking. That's because he is now a Giant, and although Kyle Rudolph isn't looked at more for his receiving prowess, he is going to be relied on more for the blocking aspects of his game, just due to the fact that they did pay for him. They are interested in getting him involved into the offense, means he is going to likely be taking away snaps from Evan Engram. When looking at Evan Engram and analyzing how he's performed throughout his entire career, one thing we all know about him is that he does require a high amount of volume to produce. He's never been a player to have a strong yards after catch ability. He's never been a significant threat in the red zone to where he's posting Jonnu Smith type games where he has 4 targets and having multi touchdowns. No, he's a player with a high snap percentage, high target totals, levels, and that's simply just what he requires in order to get the job done. Last season, we actually had the luxury of seeing a full healthy season of Evan Engram, a player who's no stranger to battling injuries. In fact, this was the first season of his entire career in which he was able to remain healthy. Considering he is one of the more quote-unquote injury-prone players, that is going to be a knock against him when it comes to safety or the rate at which he's going to bust. To his credit, he was able to remain healthy all season, but despite that fact and him receiving the second highest target totals of his entire career, he still managed to finish as the TE16 in both PPR and standard, and heading into 2021, he has more competition for targets than ever. Like I had mentioned earlier, expecting Evan Engram to play on the same amount of snaps as he did a season ago with now Kyle Rudolph on the roster, it's just an unlikely outcome. And now, even while he is on the field, the competition for targets is much greater than it's been in recent years. The team has now went out and signed the best wide receiver on the market, Kenny Golladay. This team outside of Evan Engram was severely lacking a big-bodied receiver who could be a threat in the red zone, an area where we saw Evan Engram, despite playing in all games, only caught one receiving touchdown on the year. A lot of situations where the team may have needed a big-bodied player that was going to be previously filled by just Evan Engram and solely Evan Engram. Well, now this team has a proven producer with a big body, a player who you know can get it done in the red zone, who has already proven that on his previous team. This is going to impact some of the plays that were previously drawn up for Evan Engram that may fall their way into the lap of Kenny Golladay. So when we're looking at all these risk factors for Evan Engram, for starters, his injury history, that's always going to be a bust risk factor. Second, the snap percentage likely going to decrease with Kyle Rudolph now on the roster, and with this team now having more receiving weapons than ever, with one of these receivers being a proven producer with a big body, a role that he was solely filling for this team. My concern is that many people are going to be drafting Evan Engram based off of his name value and previous production, when in reality his bust rate heading into the 2021 season is the highest we've ever seen it. But guys, that's going to do it for this video. We really hoped you enjoyed. If you did, how about hitting that like button? If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. We thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you